In the far corner of the galaxy, where stars blinked like tired eyes and sandstorms danced for days without rest, there lay a village carved into the red dunes of Zereth 9, a forgotten world clinging to life beneath twin suns. The sky burned orange at dawn and purple at dusk, and the air shimmered with heat that cracked lips and made shadows wobble like drunk dancers. This was no place for soft things. No trees, no rivers, no mercy. Only rock, dust, and the stubborn will of those who refused to die. The people of this village, called Vethra by its inhabitants, were tall and lean, their skin leathery from years under harsh light, their voices raspy as wind through broken pipes. They wore cloaks of woven silica thread that reflected sunlight and kept them cool, and they walked with slow, deliberate steps, conserving every drop of moisture their bodies could hold. Water here wasn't just valuable, it was sacred, measured in sips and guarded like ancient gold. And so, when a stranger appeared on the edge of the dune one morning, half buried in sand and breathing in shallow gasps, the villagers didn't rush to help. They gathered behind stone walls, peering out from narrow slits in their hoods, muttering words like impure and curse. For this was no ordinary traveler. She was green-skinned, her body long-limbed and graceful even in collapse, her hair a cascade of white strands like frozen lightning falling past her shoulders. Her eyes, when she opened them, glowed faintly silver, like moonlight caught in glass. She wore no cloak, only a tattered suit of some strange material that seemed to ripple in the heat, as though it remembered cooler worlds. Her fingers twitched in the sand, and her mouth moved silently, forming shapes that no one understood. The elders said she was cursed, born of forbidden star crossings, a child of chaos, not nature. They said her kind drained water just by existing, that her breath stole moisture from the air, that her touch turned wells bitter. They pointed at her and whispered about omens and plagues, how droughts followed her kind like hungry dogs. No one dared go near. Children threw small stones from a distance, giggling nervously when she flinched. The village priest, a gaunt man with a voice like crumbling paper, declared she must be left to the sun, for purity could not coexist with such filth. But then came Rennick. He arrived not with fanfare, but with a cough and a limp, dragging a rusted hoversled piled high with scrap metal and broken tech salvaged from old wrecks scattered across the wastes. Rennick was not a hero, nor a warrior, nor even particularly brave, at least not by reputation. He was a tinkerer, a fixer of broken things, a man who spoke more to machines than people and whose hands were always stained with grease and something unidentifiable. His face was round and often smudged, his nose slightly crooked from an old fall, and he wore goggles perched on his forehead like a crown he never asked for. He wasn't handsome, not ugly either, just there, like a well-worn boot. He lived on the outskirts of Vethra in a dome cobbled together from ship hulls and solar panels, where he repaired water purifiers and jury-rigged cooling units for those willing to trade food or spare parts. Most folks tolerated him, some even liked him, but no one ever called him wise, or noble, or kind, until that day, when Rennick saw the green woman lying in the sand, surrounded by wary villagers hurling insults like rotten fruit. Something inside him twisted. Not pity, not right away, but confusion. Why leave someone to die just because they looked different? To him, she looked less like a curse and more like a broken machine. Damaged, yes, but possibly fixable. He stepped forward, his boots crunching on dry salt crust, and the crowd parted like oil from water. "Move," he said, not loud, but firm in the way only quiet men can be when they've decided enough is enough. The priest stepped in front of him, staff raised. "You do not touch her, Tinker. She is impure. The sands reject her. The sky rejects her. Even the wind refuses to carry her scent." Rennick adjusted his goggles, blinking sweat from his eyes. "Well," he said, "the wind's probably just holding its breath." A few people snorted. Someone actually laughed. The priest scowled harder. Rennick knelt beside the woman. Up close, she was even stranger. Her skin wasn't just green. It shimmered faintly, like algae under pond water, shifting tone with the light. Her white hair clung to her neck in damp strands, though there was no moisture anywhere. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a struggle. He reached into his belt and pulled out a dented metal flask, the kind he used for recycled condensation, barely drinkable but safe. He unscrewed the cap, hesitated, then gently lifted her head with one hand. Her eyelids fluttered. "Here," he said softly. "Don't bite me. I'm not very tasty." He tilted the flask, letting a thin stream of liquid trickle into her mouth. She choked at first, then swallowed, weak but deliberate. A sigh escaped her, long and shuddering, like a machine rebooting after centuries of silence. The crowd erupted. "Fool!" screamed the priest. "You've defiled yourself. You've brought the curse upon us all." Women covered their children's eyes. Men spat into the sand. One young man, built like a brick oven, lunged forward and knocked the flask from Rennick's hand. It clattered across the ground, spilling the last drops into the thirsty earth. Rennick didn't flinch. He just looked up, slow and steady, and said, "You know, I worked 3 days to filter that water. 3 days. And you just wasted it like it was nothing." Then, before anyone could react, he stood, wiped his hands on his pants, and picked up the woman in his arms like she weighed no more than a sack of dried moss. "If she's cursed," he said, "then I guess I'm cursed too. Lucky me." And he walked away, carrying her toward his junkyard dome, the villagers shouting behind him, their voices swallowed by the rising wind. Inside the dome, it smelled of oil, rust, and something vaguely like burnt toast. Wires hung from the ceiling like vines. Broken gadgets cluttered every surface. A small humming generator powered a flickering light and a whirring fan that blew warm air in lazy circles. Rennick laid the woman on a cot made of repurposed seat padding and draped a thin thermal blanket over her. He checked her pulse, 3 fingers on her wrist, surprised to find it there at all, and then fetched a second flask from a sealed cabinet. This one had clearer water, filtered 6 times through layers of charcoal, sand, and a salvaged ion scrubber. He let her drink slowly, supporting her head again, talking the whole time like she could understand. "So, nice weather we're having, if you like being slowly roasted. Which, judging by your lack of clothing, maybe you do. No judgment. Just saying." She didn't respond, but her eyes stayed open now, fixed on him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "You're staring," he said. "It's rude. Also kind of creepy. Like my ex-wife when I forgot our anniversary. Which, for the record, I only did once. Okay, twice. But it was wartime." Days passed. The village buzzed with outrage. Rennick was branded an outcast, his services no longer welcome. His repair requests went unanswered. His trading stall was vandalized. One night, someone slashed the hoses on his water reclaimer, draining weeks of collected dew. He found the damage in the morning and just sighed, rolling up his sleeves. "Guess I'll have to build a better one," he muttered, already sketching ideas in the dirt with a stick. Meanwhile, the green woman, whom he'd started calling Moss because I can't keep saying "hey you" like a bad space western, began to recover. She didn't speak, not in any language he knew, but she watched everything. She studied the machines, the way gears turned, how circuits sparked. Once, when Rennick struggled to align a fractured coolant valve, she reached out and twisted it with 3 delicate fingers. Clicked into place perfectly. "Huh," he said. "Okay, so you're handy. That's a plus. 10 points." One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon and the sky blazed violet and crimson, Moss sat up fully for the first time. She swung her legs off the cot and stood, wobbling like a newborn colt. Rennick nearly dropped his wrench. "Whoa, don't fall. I don't have insurance." She took a step, then another. Her movements were smooth, almost fluid, as if her body remembered balance even when her strength lagged. She walked to the workbench, picked up a broken transmitter, and examined it with focused curiosity. Then, without looking at him, she began to disassemble it with precision that made Rennick's jaw drop. In minutes, she had replaced 2 fried capacitors with scavenged parts and rewired the frequency modulator. When Rennick powered it on, static crackled, and then a clear voice came through. "Any survivors on Zerith 9, please respond. This is Galactic Relief Vessel Amaryllis. Repeat, any survivors." Rennick froze. That hasn't worked in 10 years. Moss turned to him, her silver eyes gleaming, and gave the smallest nod. It wasn't a smile, but it was close. Hope, fragile and dangerous, bloomed in Rennick's chest. He scrambled to adjust the antenna, boosting the signal with a booster coil Moss had somehow rigged from spare wiring. "This is Rennick of Vethra. I'm alive. We're alive. There's others here." The response came quickly. "Copy, Rennick. We read you. We're 3 systems out. ETA 7 solar cycles. Confirm population status." He glanced at Moss. Mixed. Some are difficult. But yeah, people here. Please bring water. And maybe snacks. Anything non-perishable. Except raisins. Nobody likes raisins." The line fizzed, and then laughter, real human laughter, echoed through the speaker. Acknowledged. Amaryllis out. Rennick turned to Moss, grinning like a kid who just found dessert. You did it. You brilliant, green, weird-haired genius. You did it. He went to hug her, tripped over a toolbox, and landed flat on his back. Moss stared down at him. Then, for the first time, she made a sound. A soft, melodic hum that rose and fell like wind chimes. Was she laughing? Rennick groaned, rubbing his elbow. Yeah, very funny. Wait till I learn your language. I'm gonna insult your mother. But the village wasn't laughing. When word spread that Rennick had contacted offworlders, panic set in. The elders convened in the sandstone temple, their faces grim. This alien has brought doom upon us, the priest intoned. Her presence disrupts the natural order. Now outsiders will come, with their strange customs and thirst for our resources. We must act before it is too late. A plan was formed under cover of night. A group of men, armed with shock prods and old stun batons, crept toward Rennick's dome. Their mission: eliminate the alien, destroy the radio, and remind the Tinkerer where his loyalty should lie. They moved silently, shadows against the pale dunes, believing themselves righteous. They were wrong. Moss sensed them before Rennick did. She stood at the door of the dome, silhouetted by the dim interior light, her white hair glowing faintly in the dark. When the raiders approached, she raised one hand. A pulse of energy, soft at first, like a ripple in still water, spread from her palm. The sand beneath their feet trembled. The air thickened, and then, from the ground itself, tendrils of hardened crystal burst upward, forming a cage of jagged, translucent spikes around the intruders. They screamed, stumbling back, but the barrier held. Rennick ran outside, clutching a plasma torch like a sword. What in the name of rusty bolts was that? Moss didn't answer. She simply pointed at the trapped men, then at the village, then made a pushing motion with her hands. Rennick blinked. You want me to take them back? Like lost puppies? She nodded once. He sighed. Fine, but they're walking. I'm not carrying brick oven man. He ate my last protein bar. Dragging the humiliated raiders back to Vethra caused a sensation. The villagers poured into the square, staring in disbelief. The priest stammered, sorcery. She commands the earth itself. Rennick rolled his eyes. No, she doesn't. She just vibrated the minerals in the sand. Or something. Look, I don't know the science. I fix toasters. Moss stepped forward, calm and regal despite her ragged clothes. She looked at each elder in turn, then placed her hand over her heart and bowed deeply. A gesture of peace, of respect, of sorrow. The silence that followed was heavier than the desert heat. Then, a child stepped forward, a little girl, no older than 6, clutching a cracked canteen. She looked up at Moss, then at her father, who tried to pull her back. But she resisted. Slowly, she unscrewed the cap and offered it to the green woman. A single sip's worth of water. Moss knelt, accepting it with both hands. She drank just enough to wet her lips, then handed it back with a gentle smile. The girl giggled. Your skin tickles, she said. The crowd murmured. Something shifted in the air. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. Over the next few days, changes came like rain after drought. Rennick repaired the damaged water reclaimer, this time adding a new filtration system Moss helped design, one that pulled moisture from the air more efficiently than anything Vethra had ever seen. Within a week, the village's daily water ration doubled. Children began leaving small gifts outside the dome. A carved stone, a piece of colored glass, a drawing of a spaceship. The priest still glared, but even he stopped preaching curses. Instead, he watched Moss from afar, studying her movements, perhaps wondering if holiness could wear green skin. Then came the sandstorm. It rose from the eastern wastes like a wall of fury, swallowing the horizon, howling with the rage of 1,000 dying beasts. Wind screamed at 200 clicks an hour, hurling rocks and debris like bullets. The villagers sealed their homes, boarding windows and reinforcing doors. Rennick and Moss worked frantically, securing the dome with magnetic anchors and rerouting power to the shield generators. Old military tech Rennick had spent years trying to activate. This better work, he shouted over the roar. I did not survive 27 years of bad cooking and faulty wiring just to be buried alive. Moss didn't answer. She was busy syncing the frequency of the shields to match the storm's electromagnetic pulse. A trick she seemed to know instinctively. When the storm hit, the dome shuddered, but the shields flared blue, deflecting the worst of the impact. Inside, lights flickered but held. Outside, entire buildings collapsed. But not everyone was safe. A distress signal crackled through the comms. A weak, broken call from the northern shelter, where a dozen families had taken refuge. The roof was buckling. The power was failing. They wouldn't last the night. Rennick stared at the screen, then at Moss. "We can't go out there. It's suicide." She looked at him, then grabbed her cloak, a patchwork thing Rennick had made from insulation fabric, and headed for the door. "Oh, come on," he yelled. "You're not even from this planet. Why do you care?" She paused, turned, and placed a hand on his chest. He felt it. Not pain, but a warmth, a pulse, like a heartbeat not his own. Images flashed in his mind. A city of glass towers beneath a lavender sky, ships rising like birds from a silver sea. A great explosion, a fall through darkness. Her home, her people, her loss, and then, a single word, echoing in his thoughts, belong. He swallowed hard. Right? Yeah. Okay. Belonging. Got it. He grabbed his heaviest coat, strapped on a respirator, and joined her at the door. "But if we die," he said, "I'm haunting you, forever, and I'll play accordion music." Badly. The journey was hell. Sand lashed their faces like knives. Visibility dropped to 0. More than once, Rennick thought they were walking in circles. But Moss moved with certainty, her senses tuned to something beyond human perception. She led them through the storm like a compass pointing true north. When they reached the shelter, the roof was collapsing, beams cracking under the weight of wind and debris. Without hesitation, Moss placed her hands on the main support column and closed her eyes. A low vibration hummed through the structure. Cracks in the metal began to seal. Joints realigned. The building stabilized, groaning but standing. Rennick gaped. "You're not just fixing things. You're talking to them, aren't you?" She didn't answer, just nodded. They got everyone out, guiding them back to the dome in small groups, shielding the weakest with their bodies. By the time the storm passed, dawn broke over a changed world. The dunes had shifted, revealing ancient ruins half-buried for centuries. Pillars of black stone etched with symbols no one could read. And at the center of it all stood Rennick's dome, battered but intact, smoke curling from its vents like a flag of survival. Word spread fast. The elders called a council. The priest, for once, said nothing. A young woman stood and spoke. "She saved us. Not just tonight. Before. With the water. With the radio. Maybe we were wrong." Silence. Then another voice. Then another. Agreement, slow and hesitant, like roots breaking through rock. Still, not all was peace. 2 nights later, Rennick woke to the sound of footsteps. He grabbed a spanner and peered out. A figure stood at the edge of the light. Moss, dressed in a new cloak, her hair braided with threads of copper wire. She held a small device in her hands, pulsing with soft light. She looked at him, sadness in her eyes. He understood. "They're coming, aren't they? Your people." She nodded. "And you have to go." Another nod. He sat on a crate, suddenly tired. Figures. Just when things were getting interesting. She stepped forward, placed the device in his hands. It warmed instantly, syncing with his touch, and then, gently, touched his cheek. Her fingers were cool. Her eyes held galaxies. And then she turned and walked into the desert, vanishing into the rising heat haze. Rennick stood there for a long time. Then he looked down at the device. It unfolded into a map, a star chart with one system blinking brightly. "Home." He smiled. "Well," he said to no one, "guess I've always wanted to see the stars." The desert did not forget her. Even after Moss vanished into the shimmering horizon, the wind carried whispers of her name. Softly at first, like a secret past between dunes, then louder, as if the very sands mourned her absence. Rennick tried to ignore it. He buried himself in work, repairing cracked solar panels, recalibrating the new moisture harvesters Moss had helped design, fixing a child's broken toy drone just because it reminded him of the way she'd tilt her head when something puzzled her. But silence had become his enemy. The dome felt too large now, too full of echoes. Her fingerprints were still on the tools. A single white hair clung to the edge of the cot. And every night, when the twin suns bled out and the stars blinked awake, he found himself staring upward, wondering if she could see them too. Then, one evening, the radio crackled. Not with the voice of the Amaryllis, nor any human signal, but a melody. Low, haunting, rising and falling in tones that didn't belong to any language, yet stirred something deep inside him. It was familiar. It was hers. Rennick dropped the circuit board he was holding and lunged for the receiver. "Moss? Is that you? Where are you? Are you okay?" The music paused. Then, slowly, words formed. Not spoken, but felt, pulsing through the device like vibrations in bone. "Safe. Far. Thinking of you." He exhaled, half laughing, half choking. "You're doing that mind thing again, aren't you? I told you, no telepathic pranks before breakfast." Another hum, warmer this time. "Miss you." He sat back, heart thudding. She missed him. Not the village. Not the water reclaimer. Him. A strange warmth spread through his chest, unfamiliar and terrifying. Love, he realized, wasn't supposed to feel like this. Like standing on the edge of a cliff, both afraid and desperate to jump. He'd never been good with feelings. His last relationship had ended because he'd spent their anniversary rebuilding a fusion core instead of attending dinner. It was critical, he'd argued. She'd left anyway. But this was different. She wasn't human. She spoke in light and vibration. She made sand grow crystal cages and sang to broken machines like they were children. And somehow, impossibly, she had chosen him, Rennick, the grease-stained tinkerer with mismatched socks and a laugh like a coughing engine. He began recording messages. Not into the radio, but into an old data slate, speaking plainly, awkwardly, pouring out thoughts he'd never say aloud. "So, the northern irrigation line is working now. No leaks. Took me 3 tries. Would have been faster if you were here. You always knew where the weak joints were. Like you could hear the metal breathing." He paused, rubbed his neck. "I fixed little Myra's toy bird. Got it flying again. She named it Mossy. I think that's a compliment? Hope so. Also, I ate your last nutrient bar. The green one. Sorry. Tasted like dirt and regret. Should have saved it." He smiled faintly. "Anyway, just saying hi." He uploaded each message into the pulse device she'd left behind, hoping, praying, it would reach her across the void. Days passed. No response. Doubt crept in. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe her people had taken her back to their sky city of glass and song, and he was just a strange dream in a strange world. Then, one morning, he woke to find the device glowing softly on his workbench. He touched it. Images flooded his mind. A ship, sleek and silver, drifting above a planet of emerald oceans and floating islands. Trees with translucent leaves that chimed in the wind. Beings like Moss, green-skinned, white-haired, moving with quiet grace, but none with her eyes, her fire. She stood on a balcony, looking up at a sky filled with unfamiliar constellations. And in her hands, a small hologram flickered, him mid-sentence, gesturing wildly as he explained how he jury-rigged the storm shield. She was watching his message, smiling. "Home is empty," came her voice in his mind. "Without you." Rennick's breath caught. She wasn't just reaching out. She was calling him. But space was vast. The journey would be long, dangerous. He had no ship, no training, no idea how to survive among her people. Yet, as he stared at the star chart glowing in the device, one truth burned brighter than fear. He couldn't stay. Not anymore. The desert had given him purpose, but Moss had given him meaning. And if love meant anything, it meant stepping into the unknown for someone who made the universe feel less lonely. He started preparing. First, he convinced the village. That took time. And bribes. 3 working coolers, 2 water purifiers, and a promise to teach apprentices. They grumbled, but even the priest couldn't deny the changes she'd brought. The doubled water supply, the stabilized climate, the way children now played near the dome instead of throwing stones. When Rennick announced he was leaving to join her, the silence was thick. Then, from the back, a voice. "Bring back stories." Another, "And pictures." Little Mira ran forward and handed him a drawing. A stick figure, Rennick holding hands with a tall green woman beneath a rainbow sky. "So you don't forget," she said. He tucked it into his pocket, right over his heart. He scavenged what he could. A salvaged navigation ship, a radiation-shielded suit cobbled from 6 different models, oxygen recyclers, nutrient packs, no raisins, and, most importantly, a small box of earth seeds, tomatoes, basil, marigolds, because, as he told anyone who'd listen, aliens might have fancy tech, but nobody grows tomatoes like humans. "I'm bringing civilization." The final piece was the ship. Not a grand vessel with glowing engines and warp drives, but a wreck. A derelict scout pod, half buried in the eastern dunes, forgotten for decades. Its hull was scarred, its fuel cells dead, its AI barely functional. To anyone else, it was scrap. To Rennick, it was hope. For weeks, he worked day and night, Moss's pulse device guiding him, translating alien schematics into something his human mind could grasp. She sent knowledge in waves, how to recalibrate the grav thrusters, how to sync the biofield stabilizer, how to make the hull resonate with her people's frequency so the ship wouldn't be destroyed on approach. "You're basically teaching me to speak spaceship," he muttered, welding a fractured conduit. "If I die, tell my story. Make me sound cooler." On the eve of launch, the entire village gathered. Not to protest, to send him off. Lanterns glowed in the sand. Children waved handmade flags. The priest stepped forward, cleared his throat, and placed a hand on Rennick's shoulder. "We called her Impure," he said, voice low. "But purity is not in skin or blood. It is in action, in courage, in kindness. You both taught us that." Rennick nodded, unable to speak. Then he climbed aboard, sealed the hatch, and fired the engines. The takeoff was rough. Alarms blared. Warnings flashed. The ship wobbled like a drunk bird. But it lifted. And then, faster than thought, it pierced the atmosphere and soared into the velvet black. Alone now, adrift among stars, Rennick activated the pulse device. Her face appeared in hologram form, calm, radiant. "You came." He grinned, sweat on his brow. "Told you I would. Though I think I just broke 3 galactic flight laws getting here. Hope your people aren't cops." She laughed. The first real sound he'd ever heard from her, melodic and bright, like wind through crystal chimes. "They are scientists, explorers, healers. They will love you." The journey lasted months. Time stretched, stars blurred. Rennick lived on recycled air and stubborn hope. He talked to her every day, sending updates, jokes, fears. She responded in dreams, in visions, in songs that lulled him to sleep. He learned her language, not words, but feelings. The warm pulse for joy, the soft ripple for sorrow, the steady beat for "I am here." He grew thinner, older, but his heart grew lighter. When the ship finally approached her world, Lasara, she called it the Song Planet, he gasped. Oceans shimmered like liquid sapphire. Islands floated above the surface, tethered by beams of light. Cities spiraled into the sky, built not of steel, but living crystal that pulsed with energy. And there, waiting on a landing platform bathed in golden light, was Moss. She wore a robe of shifting colors, her white hair flowing like silk. As the ship landed, she stepped forward. Rennick fumbled with the hatch, tripped on the ramp, and nearly face-planted into alien soil. She caught him, held him, and for the first time, she spoke aloud, her voice soft, accented, beautiful. "Welcome home, Rennick." He looked around at the singing trees, the sky of endless blue, the people gathering with curious, kind eyes. Then back at her. "You know," he said, grinning, "this place is amazing, but it's missing one thing." She raised an eyebrow. He reached into his pack and pulled out the box of seeds. "Tomatoes, best in the galaxy. You're gonna love 'em." She laughed again, and this time he joined her, the sound weaving into the song of the world. And so, in a garden beneath twin moons, the first human-tended tomato vine bloomed on Lasara. A small red fruit against a backdrop of impossible beauty. Around it, children played, both green and pink-skinned, laughing in a language all their own. And nearby, Rennick and Moss sat side by side, hands entwined, watching the stars turn, knowing that love had carried them across deserts and galaxies, and that their story, like the universe itself, was only just beginning. The vine that bore the first tomato on Lasara became legend. Not because it was large, though it grew wild and strong, twisting up a lattice of living crystal like it had always belonged, but because of what it symbolized. Life where none had been expected, growth from the most unlikely soil, and a bond between two souls so different, yet so perfectly matched, that even the stars seemed to lean closer to listen. Children would point at it during school tours and whisper, "That's where the human who came from sand planted the first fruit." Some even believed its leaves glowed when love was near. Rennick didn't mind the stories. He chuckled at them, wiped dirt from his hands and kept gardening. But Moss? She watched him with quiet awe, the way he hummed off-key while pruning, how he argued with the weather control system like it was an old friend, how he taught her people to make something called grilled cheese, which, according to the Lasarans, smelled suspiciously like burning circuits but tasted like sunlight. In time, they stopped seeing him as an outsider. They called him Thalin Var, which meant, he who carries earth in his heart. And then came the day she took his hand beneath the singing trees and said, voice clear and steady, I wish to bind my life to yours, not just in spirit, not just in silence, in front of all, in song, in truth. Rennick froze, grease smudged on his cheek, a wrench dangling from his fingers. You mean marriage? She nodded. Like the humans do, with promises, with celebration, with terrible dancing. He burst out laughing. Oh no, you've heard about the dancing, have you? I have seen your recordings, she said, eyes twinkling. It is horrifying. I insist upon it. So they married beneath the floating arch of echoes, where the wind carried every vow across the islands. There was no priest, no ancient book, no fire or water ritual. Instead, the people formed a circle and sang, a harmony so deep and resonant it made the ground vibrate and the sky ripple with color. Rennick stood in trembling awe, dressed in a robe woven from desert sand thread and starlight silk, his hair combed, for once, his boots polished, reluctantly. Moss glowed in a gown of living moss and silver light, her white hair braided with red desert flowers he'd preserved and sent ahead before his journey. When it came time for their vows, he spoke simply, without gadgets or jokes. I didn't know what love was until I gave you water in the sand. I thought I was just being kind. But you showed me it was fate. You are the most impossible, brilliant, terrifying, beautiful thing that ever fell from the sky, and I get to call you mine. I promise to grow tomatoes forever, to fix your broken things, to annoy your scientists, and to love you, every strange, silent, shining second of you, until my last breath. A tear slipped down her green cheek. Then she sang her vow, not in words, but in a melody that wrapped around his soul, telling him of endless skies, of loneliness overcome, of a heart that had wandered the stars and finally found home. They danced, awkwardly, joyfully. Rennick stepped on toes. Moss spun too fast and knocked over a ceremonial urn, which, thankfully, repaired itself. Children laughed. Elders smiled. Even the trees chimed in approval. And then, life unfolded like a flower opening to dawn. They built a home on the edge of the largest floating island, half Laceran crystal, half human scrap metal, with a wide garden terrace where earth plants thrived beside alien blooms that changed color with emotion. Rain fell in gentle waves, and the air always smelled of ozone and basil. And soon, very soon, little feet pattered through the halls. Their first child arrived under a triple moonrise, born with soft green skin, tufts of white hair, and eyes that shimmered like her mother's. Yet with Rennick's round nose and his habit of talking to appliances. They named her Kira, meaning first light. When Rennick held her, he wept openly. She has 10 fingers, 10 toes, all present, no extra limbs. Thank goodness. I wasn't ready for antennae. But Kira was only the beginning. 2 years later came twins, Dane and Lura. One calm and thoughtful like Moss, the other loud and mischievous like Rennick. He blew up a toaster on his 3rd birthday. Family legend says he was testing interdimensional toast theory. Then came Marin, who could make plants grow just by humming, and Tevin, who invented a gravity jumping game that got banned 3 times and reinstated twice because it was too fun. In all, 7 children came, each more extraordinary than the last, each a perfect blend of desert grit and starlight grace. Rennick, once a lonely tinkerer who spoke better to machines than people, now lived in joyful chaos. Mornings began with someone spilling nutrient porridge, someone summoning a minor breeze indoors just because, and someone asking why humans use spoons instead of telekinetic transfer. Because, he'd say, wiping goop off the ceiling, spoons are reliable. Also, fun to fling. He taught them engineering, storytelling, and the sacred art of making S-mores over a plasma coil. Moss taught them empathy, harmony, and how to listen to the song of the world. The village of Vethra on Zerith 9 never forgot them. Holograms of the family were displayed in the new community center, alongside images of the storm shield and the moisture harvester. Every year, on the anniversary of Rennick's departure, the people lit lanterns and released them into the sky, whispering thanks to the man who shared his water, and the woman who taught them that purity isn't in blood, but in kindness. And far away, on a planet of song and light, an old man with graying hair and hands worn by decades of work sat on a garden bench, watching his grandchildren chase glowing butterflies above the tomato vines. Moss leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her pulse beating softly against his side. 2 hearts, different rhythms, playing the same eternal tune. One of the little ones ran up, holding a slightly lopsided metal contraption. "Grandpa, I made a communicator. Can I call Great Aunt Mira on Zerith 9? Rennick grinned. Only if you promise not to tell her I still owe her 5 credits from 60 years ago. The child nodded solemnly and dashed off. Moss looked at him, smiling. You're still a terrible liar. He shrugged. But I'm a great storyteller. And a decent gardener. And a wonderful father, she added. And husband. The best, she whispered. Even with your dancing. He laughed, the sound rising into the golden air, joining the songs of children, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of the universe turning. They had come from dust and stars, from rejection and courage, from silence and song. They had crossed deserts and galaxies, faced fear and prejudice, and built a love so vast it could not be measured in words or years. And as the twin suns of Lasara dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and violet, Rennick took Moss's hand and whispered, Best decision I ever made. Giving you that dirty flask of water. She squeezed his hand. And the best thing I ever did, she said, was swallow it. And so, in a garden among the clouds, surrounded by laughter and life, the man from the desert and the woman from the stars sat together, not as aliens, not as outcasts, but as one. Forever bound, forever loved, forever home.